Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Brilliant Metrics webinar, and welcome to 2025. We took a quick break over the Christmas and New Year's holiday, and we're back. So today we're going to be talking about achieving scale and personalization in account-based marketing. Those two things are often at odds with each other, and we're hoping to share with you our secrets to helping make them not necessarily at odds with each other. So jumping in a couple of housekeeping items, as usual, you will get a copy of these slides. If you are joining on the live stream, there will be an opportunity to scan a QR code at the end. And if you are coming in on the Zoom, we know who you are, and we'll make sure you get a copy of the slides as well as a link back to watch the recording later. Please do post questions in the chat. You can do that on the live stream, or you can do that here inside of Zoom. Get those questions out of your head while they're top of mind rather than waiting until the end. Even if I don't have an opportunity to get an answer to you live while we're talking, I will address them at the end of the presentation. A little bit about me. My name is Steve Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO here at Brilliant Metrics. I do public speaking. I mentor startups. I do a lot of different talks, and I love teaching. So this is my happy place. And that's in addition to leading the wonderful team at Brilliant Metrics. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brilliant Metrics, we are a B2B strategic marketing agency. What makes us different is we provide clarity. We've distilled the B2B marketing world down into 6 proven methodologies, and we have really tight playbooks that we love to educate the public on and help brands navigate and execute those different strategies. Shameless plug aside, let's jump into the material here. So we're going to talk about ABM, and we're first going to define exactly how this paradox works, that the more that you personalize, the less you can scale, and yet the less you personalize, the more that ABM doesn't work. From there, we're going to dig into how to get around that, and since it's a little bit different depending on the type of ABM you're running, we'll talk about strategic ABM first and then jump down to ABM light. And if those terms don't mean anything to you, don't worry, I will define them here momentarily. So without further ado, let's jump in. ITSMA is the organization that first coined the phrase account-based marketing. And then Bev, who led that organization, went on to publish this wonderful book. It used to be maroon, now it's blue, A Practitioner's Guide to Account-Based Marketing. This was considered basically the Bible of ABM, and it defines account-based marketing as treating individual accounts as if they are markets in their own right, and really emphasizes building a marketing campaign or program around each individual account. And so since that time, we've all been driven towards maximizing personalization, ideally at an account level when it comes to account-based marketing. But since this time, account-based marketing has changed, and it isn't all just strategic accounts, as well as the fact that ABM, as you scale it, gets to be harder and harder to do that personalization. Fundamentally, personalization and scale are at odds. And the reason for that is every time you go to personalize a piece of content, an ad, an email, collateral, you set a precedent. You set a precedent that for each new account coming into this account-based marketing program, we're also going to personalize that ad. We're going to personalize that creative. We're going to personalize that collateral. And so it sets yourself up to reduce your ability to scale. But scale you have to do. So if you do start to scale an ABM program, and we see this a lot when somebody will run a pilot of ABM. They'll run a pilot, they'll personalize the heck out of everything with a few accounts, and then they'll say, okay, we've got it. Let's run this at scale. And then realize that in order to do that, they have to start cutting corner after corner after corner on what they personalize to the point that it really isn't truly account-based marketing anymore, or they die a slow, painful death of lack of resources. So how we address this problem is a little bit different depending on the type of ABM. There are 3 fundamental types of ABM. The first is strategic ABM. This is really where you're going after large enterprise accounts. The lifetime value of these customers is six figures or higher. You usually have a salesperson that is working with just that account or that account and a couple of others. And so when an account gets targeted, it is a show of force between marketing and that salesperson to go and either penetrate that new whale or to further expand the relationship from maybe one or two business units across the broad array of business units or divisions within that large enterprise. ABM Light, on the other hand, is usually smaller organizations or smaller deal sizes. Your lifetime value is usually a five-figure lifetime value here. So for ABM Light, you'll have salespeople or account executives that are working multiple, sometimes many accounts at the same time. And you can have multiple accounts that they're working in the context of the ABM program at the same time, again, working to land or further expand within those accounts. Uh, Programmatic ABM is where your dollar value, lifetime value of a customer is in the four-figure or less. And here we're talking thousands of accounts flying around in, being targeted at once within an ABM program. And at this point, it's not really account-based marketing anymore. So you will find some of the thought leaders, particularly coming from the ABM software space, talk about programmatic ABM. But in our world, if you're doing it at this scale, you're not really personalizing and you're not getting any of the benefits out of true ABM. And we will flip clients over into an account-based lead generation or an account-based demand generation initiative at this point. We won't try and run ABM at this kind of scale because it's not really ABM. So let's focus on these two, strategic ABM and ABM Lite. If you're running strategic ABM, you're personalizing for every single account. Every single account is getting an unique experience. Now, does that mean they're getting completely different content from the next account? Does that mean they're getting in a completely different set of plays, which are the breakdown of activities, the cadence of activities you run accounts through? No. It could be that every touch point is personalized and you're using different words or different images or different tweaks on that same content, but every account's getting unique experience. Within ABM Lite, you can't do that. It's not scalable. And so in an ABM Lite program, the way around that is to group your accounts by shared traits or attributes and then personalize to those shared traits or attributes. And I will dig in a bunch more on this and what I mean by this here in a moment. Let's dig into strategic ABM and how to personalize at scale without killing yourself if you're running a strategic ABM program. Now, for those of you in the audience that know that they're running ABM Lite, don't let your eyes glaze over. Don't go multitask because this is important to watch to understand how we deviate from this for ABM Lite programs. The way that we structure account-based marketing here is through a cadence of plays or activities, but we break them into stages. And every account that is part of the ABM initiative is sitting in one of these boxes. And most of the time, only one account at a time is sitting in the top four: awareness, education, invitation, and connection. I'll quickly go through those stages just to set the play, but it's not that important for the context of this webinar. Awareness, when an account is in the awareness stage, we're bombarding it with brand advertising. We're working to make sure that everyone, every stakeholder, everybody on that buying committee is aware of the brand position, the basic problems and opportunities that they solve, and roughly aware that of what solutions they can bring to the table. Education is really an effort in framing the opportunities and challenges that the products and services solve, helping make those wounds a little bit more salient and increase the urgency. as well as educating on some of the features and benefits of the products and services. Invitation is an opportunity for the target account to make it their idea to engage with the brand rather than an outbound sales effort. And then connection is just the opposite. Connection is when the sales team is really going and working the phones and emails and in mails, etc., pounding that account, trying to get that meeting. Once an account has been through all the stages, if they haven't knocked themselves out of the ABM program by proving themselves to be disqualified and no longer worthy of being a target account, or by becoming a big enough customer that there's no need to run them back through again. Uh, if neither of those things have happened, they move into a nurture. And that's nurture is where all of the accounts that aren't actively in another stage are sitting, uh, and they're just getting a lower level of engagement, often with some lead scoring to go and identify with if those accounts have some intent or need. So that's the flow. Um, when we work with a client, we'll set up all of the plays and design and architect the plays with a group of accounts in mind that we're going to run in through this flow in the future. And with that, we uh, uh, we'll start feeding those accounts in a pipeline or in a conveyor sort of means. So the first account will come in. We'll work on identifying all the contacts, work on identifying all of the stakeholders within that account, get those people in the database, get them set up for media targeting. The salesperson will be working to try and get more intelligence and a better lay of the land on what's going on within different business units and different groups. And this is the important part, the marketing team is working to go personalize all of the collateral content, etc., to fit that account. That account moves on to awareness. The next account comes in, and now the marketing team is working to personalize for that account while the salesperson is gathering intelligence and we're working to get all of the correct stakeholders into the database. Same thing happens the next period or month, and then the same thing happens the next period, and so on. And by building this pipeline, you have a regular cadence of marketing activity, a regular cadence of sales activity, and you can start to compare and pattern match how a performance across different accounts and across different plays and activities within the ABM program, provided that they're relatively consistent. So when we're designing the ABM program on the front end in collaboration with the client, the goal is to figure out how to personalize each one of these plays, each one of these activities inside these stages to make it perfect and ideal for a given target account. There's two ways to do that. The first way is to evaluate, is this play even applicable? Can I run this particular play with this account? For example, it could be that we can't run an incentivized meeting play with a given account because they have corporate policies that says you can't say they can't accept a gift in exchange for anything. Well, then that particular play has to be pulled out and a different one has to be substituted for those accounts that have such policies. There are instances where certain sets of messaging or certain ideas or concepts we just plain won't land at all, and you have to throw away the whole idea or concept and replace it with something else. Or there could be geographic constraints or regulatory constraints. The GDPR can jump in if you've got European versus US accounts. There's a lot of reasons why you might need to swap out an entire action within an ABM program wholesale. But your goal is to limit the number of those swaps because anytime you change the mechanics, you limit your ability to compare analytics from account to account, and it creates that many more moving parts. We've now doubled the amount of work we have to do for this particular play within the ABM program because we've doubled the amount of setup that we have to do for the different mechanics. A better route to go is to run the same play but change the content or the language and imagery within the content to be hyper focused, hyper relevant to that target account. So when we talk about that personalization to create that hyper relevance, that hyper focus, there are actually three different vectors or different approaches to that personalization. And we like to think about it in terms of uh, seen, sound, and say. So, how do I want uh, our content to be seen by that target account? And the one of the easy ones to address is photography. If you have multiple different target accounts in your ABM program and they're in different industries, chances are your brochures, your ebooks, your white papers, your advertising has photography that may not look like the account that you're targeting. It could have equipment in the photograph that doesn't match. It could be of a giant office building when they're actually, distributed. It could be that they are uh, uh, working with a particular technology or product inside of that photography that this target account doesn't work with. Swapping that photography out is a relatively easy hit when it comes to updating collateral and updating advertising and messaging and content. Colors. We've had clients in strategic ABM programs focus on matching the target account's colors instead of focusing on staying on brand with their colors. Sometimes they play nice together and you can mix and match and create a nice medley of the color palette of the target account and your own brand's color palette. And the same thing with typography. If you're going to create a landing page for a target account, swapping out the typography and the colors for that landing page to match the target account's brand. When they click that link, they're going to feel like they're on their own intranet or in their own environment, and the conversion rate will go up. I know that seems a little bit counter to brand evangelists saying everything needs to be on brand as far as the visual identity goes. But at the end of the day, your goal is to convert, right? So the more you can match the look and feel of the target account, the better off you're going to be. And then finally, logo. Incorporate the client's logo into as much of your advertising, into as much of your landing page experience, and as much as your content as you possibly can. You can create a template for an ebook and literally have a slot where you can slide in that target account's logo. You can do the same thing with advertising. So it's a really quick and easy hit. Sometimes a little hard to get it to work with the colors and the layout and the positioning, but it's worth the effort for a strategic ABM program. So that's impacting how you're seen. Let's talk about how you sound. The words you use are really important in account-based marketing. Another easy swap is vocabulary. Pretty much every large enterprise has its own proprietary language it speaks inside. There is vernacular and vocabulary and terminology that they use inside of the company as part of their culture. And if you can match that in your messaging, you're going to come out way ahead versus using the language you use as a brand. So swap out that vocabulary and make it tie back to the words that the target account uses when they're talking amongst each other. Tone is a little bit trickier, but if you are going after an account that is really, really buttoned up and tight and kind of stodgy, and you've got a really fun tone to everything, it's not gonna jive as well as if you kind of tone it down a little bit. And conversely, if you're generally just the facts, ma'am, kind of a brand, and you're trying to sell into a fun, frivolous enterprise, you might need to up the fun level just to match. And that can be easy to do just by changing the tone and tenor of some of the emails that you're sending, the ad copy, etc. And then finally, say, I think this is where the real magic happens inside of account-based marketing. What do you want to say to this target account that would be different from other target accounts inside the ABM program? And this boils down to what are their challenges? What sort of challenges does this company have that other companies might not? What are their opportunities? Where can they go that their competitors cannot, or that other companies inside the ABM program cannot? What are the common objections that the salesperson hears within this account that they don't hear from other accounts? preempt those objections. If they've come up in one or more business units that they're already working with, they're probably going to come up in the other business units because those objections are probably largely based on core tenets or values of the organization. Priorities. Spend some time looking through investor materials and see where they're telegraphing that they're going to go. Focus on those priorities in your copy and in your content. And in doing so, you'll be able to align the organizational goals with where you can take them as a vendor. And then finally, path to purchase. Every enterprise is different and has slightly different rules, regulations, processes, gatekeepers, etc., in bringing a vendor on board. Make sure you're speaking to that path to purchase. If they have an approved vendors list and you're on it, talk about it. It's those sorts of things that'll really clearly convey that you understand how they do business and you're not telling them about your process that really isn't compatible with how they work. So those are the elements of personalization. Let me give you an example here. This is a client. This was a client of ours, Crystal Group. We ran an account-based marketing program with them that was a strategic ABM program. Um, One of their targets was Raytheon, and we put the Raytheon name on everything we could, in some cases, the Raytheon logo. And the red color at the top of this ad isn't Crystal's color. They've never used that color in advertising before, although they just did a rebrand. Maybe they do now. That red is Raytheon red. And they pulled it into the ad, and they pulled that Raytheon red into a lot of the advertising and a lot of the landing pages and a lot of the content for this ABM program. It paid off. This was a really successful ABM program, and they grew their business with Raytheon by lots of money. I can't give a figure, obviously. So where can you do this personalization? There's really 2 points. The first is what I'd call the packaging, right? This is how you're delivering that message or delivering that call to action. It's the email copy, the email imagery. It is the ad copy or the ad imagery. It is the direct mail piece, or the letter that goes along with a 3D mailer, right? These are all opportunities to introduce personalization that doesn't change what you're asking the person to do or read or watch. On the other side, you have the content itself. This is the video, the ebook, the white paper, the webinar, the whatever it might be that you're asking them to engage with. The packaging is a lot easier to adapt from cohort to cohort to cohort. You don't have to worry about hosting an alternate version of an asset. You don't have to worry about opening up InDesign files and going and searching for terms and getting them updated. But every detail matters, and depending on the level at which you're working with, you need to find your balance. Definitely start on the left and then introduce as much of the personalization on the right as you can afford to based on the ROI you're looking to get out of this strategic ABM program. The other thing about the left is because usually these are tied to the delivery mechanism, at least the more addressable ones, things like email and direct mail. You can personalize at a persona level as well as just at the account level. So if you know you need to speak to the CTO differently than you need to speak to the CFO, but both of them need this piece of content, then personalize that messaging accordingly across the different personas and roles. What's nice is oftentimes that personalization will survive the changes from this account to the next account to the next account. There's less rework associated with that level of personalization. The content itself isn't really worth personalizing down at a persona level, partly because A, that content usually has a persona in mind when it was produced. And so trying to adapt it to make it work for other personas doesn't always pay off. So sometimes we'll just not deliver that particular piece of content to a given persona, especially via those addressable mediums like email and a mailer, um, just to uh, get the right content in the right person hands instead of trying to adapt that content to be applicable to multiple different personas. Okay, so that's strategic. Let's jump into ABM Lite and what personalization looks like here. In order to do that, I have to come back and explain what I mean by grouping accounts. When we group accounts in an ABM Lite program, we call it a cohort. It's a cohort of like accounts, and they're like on a basic set of attributes. The flow is the same, only instead of running one account from awareness to education to invitation to connection and back through nurture, we're running a cohort or a group of accounts through awareness over to education, from education over to invitation, from invitation to connection, and then into nurture. And there's usually several cohorts sitting in the nurture section, and one account or one cohort sitting in each awareness, education, invitation, and connection. There are exceptions to that, but I'm not going to get in the weeds on that. And it's the same thing here. We're building that pipeline, that conveyor belt of those accounts, identifying which accounts are in that cohort, often pulling intent signals off to go figure out which accounts need to be in that cohort, and then fleshing out all of the contacts associated with it, as well as personalizing any content or creative to that cohort's unique attributes. Now, that said, we're going to group accounts into types. It's not like cohort one is completely different from two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. No, cohort one might look like cohort four, might look like cohort seven, etc., as they fit a particular cohort type. And all of the companies inside of all of those cohorts are going to look roughly the same. Um, every cohort isn't a bespoke, different, unique animal. All right. For ABM Lite, we're still going to look at scene, sound, say, but some of our tactics come off the table. For scene, we're really limited to photography. We can't go throwing companies' logos into our ads because we're throwing those ads at a bunch of different companies. There are some technologies that sit out there, although they're expensive and they're challenging to use, that'll let you do one-to-one account level advertising swaps. But honestly, at this level, it doesn't necessarily pay because now you've got to go and pull logos and validate logos for every single account inside of that cohort. If you try to automate it, you can end up with some really scary looking ads. So we don't generally do any personalization visually, including colors and logos and that sort of stuff, beyond just making sure that the photography that we use inside of the advertising matches the environment in which that cohort of accounts operates. So if we are running an ABM program at chemical manufacturers and food manufacturers and automotive manufacturers, we're going to swap out that photo of a chemical plant with a food facility with an auto facility, right? So that they can see themselves in the photography. Anytime you're putting photography into collateral, you're trying to get the audience to see themselves in that photo. And so that's what we want to facilitate here. That can be done even if it's a cohort of a whole bunch of different companies, provided they can all see themselves in a given photo. For sound, vocabulary is going to change, but not based on the words that are used inside a particular company or account, but instead based on how different industries talk about things, or how different sizes of operations might talk about things, or the other attributes that you might group your accounts along. You're not necessarily going to adjust your tone because you can't adjust your tone to every single account within the cohort, and you're not going to group accounts usually by the tone or tenor of their speech. And then on say, pretty much all of them apply here. You can still look specifically at the challenges, opportunities, and objections common to this group of companies. Priorities, you're not going to be able to go pull all of their investor reports. Although sometimes whole industries have priorities. Whole industries are going through changes, at which time, if you're grouping your accounts by industry, you can pull some of that language into what you're saying as well and prioritize those bullet points, prioritize those aspects. The same thing is true of path to purchase. This is especially true if you break your cohorts up by size of organization. The path to purchase is often different if you're dealing with smaller versus medium-sized companies. Okay. So on the left, I just have a list of a lot of the different segmentation attributes that we use for both lead generation, overall marketing planning, as well as account-based marketing. Your criteria are going to be unique to you and what you're selling. You need to cherry pick which of these make sense to you to group your cohorts with three goals in mind. The first goal, you don't want to build a cohort that's going to overload one of your sales reps. So geography is often a poor criteria because generally you'll have sales teams divvied up geographically. And if you built a cohort out of Northeast, even though they might share a lot of attributes on what they want to see, you would overload the Northeast sales rep with all of the accounts that month to go and try and call on. Doesn't work very well. You want to spread that love over as many reps as you can, and really you don't want to go above 30 accounts that you're expecting that salesperson to pick up the phone and call. Fewer if they're large accounts and they have to call multiple stakeholders. Each cohort has to end up large enough that you can use the media that you want to use to target it. A great example is Meta or Facebook. If I want to use Meta or Facebook inside of an ABM program, I need to have a minimum of 1,000 matched contacts that I'm targeting within that particular cohort. That means generally feeding in between 1,500 and 2,000 contacts into the system to do the matching. If I create a cohort that is so small I don't have enough contacts, now all of a sudden Meta comes off the table as a potential tactic for that cohort. And now I've got a little special cohort that has a different set of tactics in order to be able to try and compensate. Stuff like that will kill you as soon as you create deviances in special situations for cohorts in the mechanics of how they're run, you increase the cost and complexity of your program. So be mindful of the tactics you're using. Flip side of that would be if direct mail is something that you're doing and you're sending a 3D mailer, you don't want to have a ginormous cohort because then that could actually blow up your budget. So then you'd be looking, well, I need to pull that off there. So be mindful of that situation. And then finally, and this is the most important one, just like if you've heard me preach about market segmentation and how you segment your market or the number of personas you have, fewer cohort types is better up until you need to be seen, sound, or say something different to those accounts. As soon as you have a different message, as soon as you have different vocabulary, as soon as images deviate enough that your target accounts can't see themselves in those images, that's when you need to split. An example of this is Catholic Virtual here. For them, their cohorts were based on the size of the diocese and the community that they were in, because that dictated whether they had one high school or multiple high schools. And if they had multiple high schools, then they were generally buying at the diocese level, which is like the school district level for Catholic schools, and then sharing that resource across multiple schools. But if it was a smaller diocese, each individual school was making the buying decision, and it was usually based on plugging holes and staffing shortages. It wasn't based on trying to expand curriculum or add to what their offerings were. And so we split the cohorts up that way, and we would run a small medium, then a large, then a small medium, then a small medium, then a large. And it allowed us to personalize content for those cohorts appropriately. Uh, this is going back a ways, but we ran an ABM program for our client Evention. And for them, they had the intelligence at the time that K-12 schools cared more about the student experience, whereas higher ed cared more about doing right by the staff and the business aspects of making an equipment purchase. And so we would run the um, same creative with different copy based on whether we were targeting that particular cohort. And so they'd run like a K-12, then a higher ed, then a convenience store, then a K-12, then a higher ed, then a convenience store. By grouping the accounts based on differences in their needs, differences in how the brand needs to be seen, how the brand needs to sound, and how the what the brand needs to say, you're able to build these tight groups. Again, fewer types is better. Your packaging is exactly, or your choices of where to personalize are exactly the same in ABM Lite as they are in strategic ABM. The difference is you're looking at, instead of persona and account level, you're looking at persona versus cohort level. So packaging, it's easy to personalize both persona and cohort, whereas content, you're really only doing that personalization at a cohort level. All of the accounts within that cohort type, that account type, are going to get the same video, the same ebook, the same white paper. There's one other advantage though. If I'm going to be running multiple cohorts of this type through my program over the course of the year, I don't have to personalize everything all at once. I can start by personalizing the packaging first and really get that personalization into the email copy, get that personalization into the social ad copy, get that personalization into the direct mail pieces. And then later, as the program matures, go and split that video and have a version for K-12 versus higher ed, or have a version for small companies versus medium companies, or whatever it is I need to do in order to personalize that content. I can kick that can down the road. I don't need to do that right out of the gate. I can wait 3 or 4 cohorts before I go to personalize it. That really reduces the amount of lift that goes into getting an ABM program launched for ABM Lite. And it's one of the advantages of ABM Lite over strategic ABM, because strategic ABM, you get one shot at that account, and then you have to wait 12, 18 months for that account to come back around. And then you have to be careful not to repeat too much because they've seen it before. So let's sum up. You want to look at the accounts or cohort types when you're choosing your plays. Use things you can use universally. Don't change the mechanics every time you need to change out your cohort or change out your accounts. Look for opportunities to personalize based on how you want to be seen, how you want to sound, and what you want to say. Seen, sound, say. Packaging can be personalized a lot easier than the collateral itself. So start there for ABM Lite, and focus on personalizing that packaging both at the persona and at the account level. And then finally, for ABM Lite, you really want to put a lot of effort into how you divvy up your accounts into cohorts. That is going to be the make or break decision on whether personalization kills you. I know those things don't seem like they're directly connected, but they really are. The tighter and fewer your cohort types are, the less personalization you have to do, and the better job you do at packaging your accounts into cohorts, the more impactful the personalization you do put in place will be. So with that, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, if you're confused on any points and want to meet one-on-one, just scan that middle QR code. That'll go right to scheduling a meeting with me. I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. We put out a fair amount of content and thought leadership. And I'd love to hear if you have any questions. Don't see anything in the live stream. And I don't see anything in Zoom. All right. Well, with that, please do reach out if you'd like to chat about ABM at your organization. And I hope you have a wonderful day.